Well, we'll go ahead and get started tonight. We're on chapter 3 or lesson 3 of the book, Imprecatory Psalms, Seeking Justice. Telling Brother Epperson Sunday, I said, I wish they wouldn't use big words like this because you have to go look them up and see what it means. But it says in here, it's where I actually looked it up on the dictionary, and it said evil thinking or evil thoughts or evil, upon somebody, or vengeance. And that's what it says here, that the Psalms invokes God to execute his vengeance against the ungodly. So it's continuing on with what we had in the first two lessons of God taking control, and even more than that, though, what it's saying in the lesson tonight is, yes, in Psalms, lists them in 2, 37, 69, 79, 109, 137, 139, 143. Several places, David was basically asking God to take these people and do with them because of their evil nature. And then you leave it alone. It's vengeance, but it's from God. We seek him for what he will do. He can see the evil that's happening because of their what they're doing. And then we leave it in God's hands. We can't do anything about it. If we start to do anything about it, then that becomes vengeance. I mean, revenge, basically, on our part. We don't need that. So we're going to read through the first, let me read the golden text. It's in Jeremiah 11 and 20. It says, O Lord of hosts, that judgest righteously, that triest the reins and the heart, let me see thy vengeance on them, for unto thee have I revealed my cause. We see several times that all through the Old Testament and New Testament too, we'll catch up on a couple of those too, that says that we should, pray for our enemies, but then we need to pray that they would be, that God would intervene in behalf of them. Okay, the scriptures is Psalms 137, and it goes through 1 through 9, but we're just reading the last part of it. The first verse says, by the rivers of Babylon, where there we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. And 8 skips to verse 8. O daughter of Babylon, who art thou to be destroyed? Happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. That sounds pretty harsh in our meaning, but we have to understand what had happened. Jerusalem had been destroyed, and they had been exiled, and they had, left a lot of people. In doing that, it was approximately, I think it says here, about 20 years. It says the destruction of Judah and Jerusalem by the Babylonians occurred over 20 years. We think of it happening right away, but one of the histories that I was reading said that Nebuchadnezzar came up and he attacked, and he couldn't get into Jerusalem because of its, first of all, it's on a hill, and then it has big towers, walls built right up into the hill. So there's really only a few ways that you can get in, and those were blocked. So for a long time, they wasn't able to conquer Jerusalem. But in the meantime, he had other wars to go fight. So he'd pull his people off, and then they'd do it again. And they set about, in the 20 years, they eventually just waited them out. The people would pull into the city, and bar, bar it all up, put the gates up and everything. But you can't wait that long. I mean, we've been in it just over a year now in our coronavirus, trying to, capture or trying to get rid of the virus, and we think we're going crazy, stir crazy. Nothing will ever be the same. Just think of them. They were 20 years. Somebody was knocking at their door wanting to get in and take care of them. So you can kind of see that that's um, one of the reasons they're crying out to him. And the happy, verse 9 says happy. Actually, the word is blessed. Um, most of the time, it's rendered blessed instead of happy. So blessed shall he be that taketh and dasheth the little ones against the stones. He's just saying that it would be better if our little ones didn't have to endure this. And it's talking both about theirs, and the Babylonians. If he would feel a lot better if they would just be wiped out. That's what the psalmist is saying there. The verse composes the word cursing, and that's what imprecatory, another version of imprecatory, means. So it's in effect the expression of a prayerful desire to see God, that his vengeance would be carried out against the enemies of the Jewish people. Now we said before that it's okay to be in self-defense mode, that if somebody's attacking you or coming against you, you can attack them, or defend yourself. But going and attacking somebody that's not, trying to hurt you, that's not right. And that's what it's telling us here, that, okay, we just tell God, this is what's happening. You take care of it, God. And that's what we need to do. It comes across in the New Testament that way. In the Old Testament, it looks pretty harsh. But you got to understand that they had harsher ways back then. They, like we said earlier, that they killed the men, women, children, and everything when they'd wipe cities out. When Israel went into the Canaan land under God's authority, they did that, but that was to save them from dying slowly later on. They would just starve to death, basically. That the enemies in mind here first were the Edomites, which were descendants of Esau, who sided with the Babylonians in their destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, and the Babylonians themselves, who were the principal destroyers of Jerusalem in the psalm. The captives' prayers for God's vengeance on the Edomites and Babylonians were consistent with what had already been prophesied regarding the Babylonians and the Edomites. Both Isaiah and Jeremiah prophesied God's destruction judgment would fall on the Babylonians. And as we see that happening, we've, in the minor prophets, we were reading about that it was going to happen. Many of them were bringing that forward. Obadiah was another one. It says the Jewish captives in Babylon prayed for God's righteous judgment that was foretold by the prophets. These wicked and cruel nations would come to pass what, the Lord would have them to do. And here it says, Christians most find troubling these phrases, happy or blessed shall be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Sometimes they were treated like dogs. They were treated as inferior. They were treated as slaves. They, captured them and took them over. Where before they were free people, they had their own lands and everything. So you would get a little angry at that. You'd get a little, want some vengeance because they couldn't see. They were captured for 70 years. They were, until they were allowed to go back to Jerusalem. Okay. Another one of the scriptures they had is in Deuteronomy. It's 32 and verse 35 and 43. And here it's talking about, it's Moses talking about God talking to him, says, "To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. Rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants, and will render vengeance to his adversaries, and will be merciful unto his land and to his people." Now we see this, again, they're talking about God's vengeance, not ours. It says the Apostle Paul makes clear in First Thessalonians, says, uh, see that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. Now, it's like I said, it's okay to pray to God, and the things that they said that you need to pray these types of prayers, and a lot of times people do pray the Psalms. If you pray these, you pray these against a couple of different ways. The main thing is we pray against the adversary, which is the devil. Okay. We can pray that God's going to take care of him in his own time, that he would protect our families and take care of us in this time. But we are looking forward to the day when God will see the justice, or he will reign and do that judgment. Here it talks about the self-defense for self-preservation. It says God is the only one who would administer his vengeance and his own actions against that time. Romans 13 also tells us, for he, the civil servant, is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Governments are not to turn the other cheek to those who do evil, but are to put in place to administer justice. A lot of people have missed that boat. They do it for power, they do it for fame, they do it to enhance their own stature or whatever you want to say. But essentially, being in a civil role or a civil servant is that. They don't understand that phrase, a servant, anymore. They need to listen to what the people do and then go carry it out. Yeah, they have their own understanding, but that's not what they were elected to do. They were elected to serve the people, and that's what and some of them do that. Some of them try to the best of their ability. The commandment of God to Israel to leave vengeance to God was carried over into the Christian teaching by the early church. Deuteronomy, it says, beloved, dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto the wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. That's in Romans. Romans is the last part of that, vengeance is mine. And for we know him that hath said, vengeance belongeth unto me, I will recompense, saith the Lord. That's in Deuteronomy that we read. And then again, the Lord shall judge his people, the last part that's part of Deuteronomy and also quoted in Hebrews. So we go back to Psalms and talk about leaving vengeance to God a little bit more. Verse 24, 25, and 26 is the ones highlighted here. Pour out thine indignation upon them. Let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents, for they persecute him whom thou hast smitten, and they talk to the grief of those whom thou hast wounded. It says those who offered prayers to God for God to execute his vengeance against the evildoers, which we read in Psalm 69 and 109, they were acting in obedience to God's commandment that they leave vengeance with God. Through prayer, they were saying to God, in effect, we leave this vengeance to you, and we seek justice by you, asking you to avenge us over our enemies. David did ask for specific acts against the enemies. God grants petitions only in keeping with his will. So we can ask all we want sometimes, but if it's not according to God's will, it's not going to happen. Paul offered up in 2 Timothy, he was pretty perturbed at some people too. Here he says, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. The Lord reward him according to his works. So we can see in here, we even see Jesus, when he went into the temple and saw the money changers and things and told them that they'd made it a den of thieves. It's supposed to have been a place of worship. And he had made it a den of thieves. And he didn't do it very politely either. Said he had some whips, I think, and turning the tables over and making people really mad, upsetting the apple cart. That's what it was. Okay. Another Psalms is 109:16. Because that he remembered not to show mercy, but persecuted the poor and needy man, that he might even slay the broken in heart. And as he loved cursing, so let it come unto him. As he delighted not in blessing, so let it be far from him. So these are prayers, offerings to God that these authors were using in their time. There were things happening to them that they needed God to intervene on. Sometimes we have that in our lives too. We have things that we can't see a way out, and we just have to ask God, tell God, you're going to have to take care of it. Maybe we feel that it's misplaced or something, and it may be something that we're doing. So we have to be careful, to have God show us if it's something on our part. So. Exodus talks about this a little bit too. Verse 23 and 4-5. If thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him. If thou see the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden, and wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help with him. So it's basically kind of the Good Samaritan. If you see something happening, you need to go do something about it. If you were in that same situation, you would want somebody to help you. Even though it may be your enemy, because you do that, because you're helping them, sometimes that will put an indicator or put something in their life that they will understand they're not treating you right. And they may have misunderstood some of the things that they thought about or they had in their mind. Let's see. In the last portion, here's one on Leviticus too. We'll read it. Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. Brother Epperson was talking about the 10 Commandments and then down to the 2. This is talking about it here, that we need to love them like we love ourselves. Even though they may be treating us wrong, we need to understand and have some mercy upon them. Like I said, we always hear one side of the story. We don't hear this other side, and we jump to conclusions or we interpret it incorrectly. So we have to be careful in how we deal with that. Proverbs 24:17 and 18. Rejoice not when thine enemy falleth. Let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth. lest the Lord see it and it displease him, and he turn away his wrath from him. It says in the New Testament, Christians are taught not to have a vengeful attitude or engage in vengeful behavior toward enemies. This is the same moral principle that's taught in the Old Testament, as we've read a couple already. It says it warns against rejoicing against the enemy. This proverb in 25:12 instructs people to feed their enemy even if he is hungry, and to give him drink if he is thirsty. It says thereby to heap coals of fire on his head. Now we always take that meaning to that it's going to put a lot of pressure on him. He's going to have to reevaluate, maybe I'm treating you wrongly. Here it talks about, it said that the hot coals they used in the old days, when they'd start a fire, they'd keep them going from day to day. They'd find some coals and start their fire with the next one. And what they would do, sometimes when they'd have to travel, they'd take those hot coals and put them in a jar or some kind of bowl and put them on their head to carry them. They carried a lot of their things on their head. I couldn't carry nothing on my head. So here it says hot coals were often transported in a pottery container on the top of one's heads. Thus, the instructions for appropriate attitudes and behavior towards enemies are found to be the same. So we need to, when we see somebody in need and we can help them, no matter what they have done to us, we should offer that help. Sometimes we don't like what they've done. Sometimes, like I said before, people will cut you off in traffic. Well, you don't need to speed up and get right on their bumper, flash your lights at them, that you're mad. You need to back off and you need to travel like a sane person. It's just crazy the way people drive. I think this pandemic has made people just bizarre on driving, even worse. I just can't believe going back and forth to work. It was fine when it first started because nobody was on the road, but now it's crazy. Worse than it ever was, seems like. It says, as disciples of Christ, our priority must be to follow his example. When he was reviled, he reviled not. When he suffered, he threatened not, but he committed himself to God that judges righteously. This is certainly not an easy task. However, like Christ, we too have the presence of the Holy Spirit to enable us to do what seems impossible by human standards and what is out of step with our culture. Pray for strength to withhold retaliation against evildoers, and to trust in God's providential justice over all wrongdoers. My helper just jumped up here. So, any comments? Well, at least maybe you learned a new word, imprecatory. I'm sure you'll use it a lot. So, all right. Well, we'll see some of you Sunday and see the rest of you online, I guess.
God bless you, everybody.
Have a good week.